Okay, so there's this massive summit coming up between the US and Russia. You've probably heard about it. The whole world is watching. But what we really need to ask is, what are we looking at here? Is this a real shot at peace? Is it a dangerous replay of historical appeasement? Or is it just kicking the can down the road, postponing an even bigger war?
To really get what's going on behind the scenes, we're going to dig into the work of Vitaly Portnikov. He's a Ukrainian journalist, and his analysis, well, it cuts right through the official statements and helps us understand what this summit actually means for everyone on the ground.
And right off the bat, Portnikov sounds the alarm. He's saying, look, this whole thing feels rushed. It hasn't been properly prepared. It's basically being improvised. And you know, when you're dealing with stakes this high, making it up as you go along, that's a recipe for disaster. That's where, as he puts it, catastrophic decisions can happen.
So, what makes this improvisation so incredibly risky? Well, it all comes down to the fact that everyone walking into that room wants something completely different. We're not just talking about different priorities, we're talking about three fundamentally conflicting agendas.
Okay, just look at this. It's a total mess of conflicting interests. Russia's #1 goal, get the US to stop supporting Ukraine. But for Ukraine and Europe, that American support is literally their lifeline. Meanwhile, the US is trying to play this bigger global chess game, right? Trying to pull Russia away from China. And that ambition alone puts Ukraine in an incredibly vulnerable spot. You can see it's basically a deadlock before they even shake hands.
And this is such a critical point from Portnikov's analysis. For Vladimir Putin, just showing up is a huge win. Think about it. The West worked for years to isolate him, to put up this sanitary cordon around him diplomatically. This one meeting with the US president, it just shatters all of that. He's back on the world stage. So for him, the summit itself is a victory, no matter what actually gets decided.
All right, so the big word everyone is throwing around is ceasefire. Sounds pretty good, right? Stop the fighting? But Portnikov warns us to be really careful here. A ceasefire isn't just a ceasefire. It's a fork in the road with two very, very different destinations.
And here is that fork in the road, laid out perfectly. Path #1 is sustainable peace. We're talking about a real resolution, based on international law that respects Ukraine's internationally recognized 1991 borders. Path #2, well, that's what Portnikov calls a delayed war. Yeah, the shooting stops for now, but all it really does is freeze the front lines and give Russia a breathing room to rearm and get ready for round 2. The war isn't over. It's just on hold.
But wait a second. Portnikov brings up a really fascinating counterpoint. Everyone's focused on how a pause helps Russia. But what if Ukraine could flip the script and turn that pause into a strategic opportunity for itself?
He calls this idea a country fortress strategy. The thinking is, Ukraine wouldn't just sit back during a ceasefire. No way. It would use that precious time to go into overdrive. It'd be about rapidly building its own defense industry, putting the whole national economy on a military footing, and even mobilizing its citizens returning from abroad for national defense. It's not about taking a break. It's about using the pause to become so strong that the next war is unthinkable.
Okay, so let's shift focus to the American perspective for a minute, because this entire conflict is highlighting a massive clash inside U.S. foreign policy. If you ask, what's America's #1 goal here? Well, the answer really depends on who you ask in Washington.
You've got these two competing mindsets. On one side, there's what Portnikov calls the Trump doctrine. It sees the biggest threat as the Russia-China alliance. So the goal is to peel Russia away from China. And the main tool for that might be offering concessions, with Ukraine being the obvious one. But then you have the more traditional view, which says, whoa, hold on. A major war in Europe is always a direct threat to U.S. national security. For them, stability in Europe is everything.
And this gets right to the terrifying heart of the problem. If your main goal is to break up the Russia-China partnership, then Ukraine stops being an ally that needs defending and starts looking like a price to be paid, a bargaining chip. And that, right there, is the absolute nightmare scenario for Kyiv and its European allies.
So where does this all leave us? Well, Portnikov argues that to understand what might happen next, we actually have to look back, because history is casting a really long, really dark shadow over this whole affair.
First, we have to be crystal clear about the context here. This isn't just some political disagreement. This summit is happening because there's an active war going on. Russia's invasion, its air terror campaign targeting Ukrainian cities, its occupation of sovereign land, these are by definition severe violations of international law. They are war crimes. So let's be clear, this is a negotiation with an active aggressor.
And that's exactly why these historical parallels feel so urgent. Portnikov warns this summit could become a disastrous combination of two of history's biggest mistakes. You've got the ghost of Munich in 1938, where leaders tried to appease an aggressor by sacrificing a smaller country, hoping for peace for our time, and instead got World War II. And you've got the ghost of Yalta in 1945, where the great powers carved up a continent, deciding the fate of millions without them even being in the room. The fear is we're about to see a repeat.
Ultimately, Portnikov's entire warning boils down to this one powerful and frankly haunting idea. A deal that freezes the lines and leaves Russia in control of Ukrainian territory isn't peace. In his words, it creates a Europe pregnant with war. It's a terrifying thought that the conflict isn't ending, it's just gestating, waiting to be born again, perhaps even bigger than before.
So that's where we are. We have contradictory goals, existential stakes, and the ghosts of history watching over it all. As these leaders prepare to meet, the question for all of us is this: are we about to watch them defuse a crisis, or are they just lighting the fuse on a much wider war?